One man bears a good deal of responsibility for bringing Polish settlers to northeast Wisconsin. J. Hoff sold 80-acre wilderness parcels to Poles who planted crops around the stumps and started farming in the wake of the logging boom. Hoff was a master promoter and an expert at using the media of the day. His flyers and maps showed thriving communities with railroads and churches, although some of the amenities pictured were still in the planning stages. He started in the real estate business in 1875 as an employee of the General Land Company in Milwaukee. He sold land for between $10 and $15 per acre, receiving a $1 commission. His customers were Polish immigrants. Over the course of his career, he donated land to a variety of communities to build churches and schools, most notably in Pulaski, where his 120-acre land donation became the foundation of a Polish Franciscan community. Hoff was generous to Polish settlers and offered forbearance when they fell on hard times. He is buried in the St. John Cantius Parish Cemetery in Sobieski, Wisconsin. In the 1870s, immigrants could find industrial work with the railroads. Railroad technology was as transformative to society as the internet and smartphone technology is today, perhaps more so. But working for the railroad was dangerous work. Many workers were maimed in train yard accidents. There was no OSHA to protect workers, and the technology could be unreliable at times. Locomotive boilers would explode, trestles could collapse. Coal mining was another option. Besides the obvious danger from working with explosives underground, black lung disease was an eventual certainty. A surfeit of immigrant labor kept wages low and working conditions poor in both of these industries. A big factor for Poles in deciding to immigrate was that there was no opportunity for a Pole to own his own farm in Eastern Europe. This provided an opportunity for Mr. Hoff, who was a master of late 19th century and early 20th century media. No, it wasn't Facebook and Twitter, but well-placed newspaper articles, a variety of advertisements and flyers, and a letter-writing campaign by satisfied customers got his message across. Hoff was a tireless promoter. He initially marketed his Norwegian countrymen. He had little success with Scandinavian immigrants, but as an astute businessman, Hoff must have recognized that hundreds of thousands of Poles were leaving Austria, Prussia, and Russia and arriving on the U.S. shore. From 1870 to about 1910, an estimated 1.5 million Poles immigrated to the United States. Many, if not most, dreamed of owning their own farm. He placed ads in Polish-language newspapers in both the United States and abroad. He distributed flyers in Milwaukee's Polish neighborhoods. He found some early success in 1877 when my great-grandfather, Valentine Peplinski, and several other families bought farms west of Laney and north of Huffa Park. Eventually, Hoff concentrated all of his efforts on developing the Huffa Park, Pulaski, Krakow, and Sobieski areas. Hoff never stopped promoting. Since the railroad went through Sobieski on the way to copper and iron mines in the Upper Peninsula, he set up his office in Sobieski, close to the railroad station, and contracted with a livery stable so that immigrants arriving from Chicago by train would have transportation to their land. Besides placing newspaper ads in Europe, Hoff encouraged Poles who had purchased farms from him to write letters to their relatives in Europe. In 1894, the Norwegian immigrant real estate salesman who had built a successful business in the United States by developing Polish colonies in northeast Wisconsin traveled to Eastern Europe to sell his vision of Polish colonies in Wisconsin. I found it interesting that the Oconto County Reporter offered the opinion that the immigrants would vote the Democratic ticket. In 1894, midterm national elections, Democrats lost a 100-seat majority as Republicans took control of the House and the Senate. The Gilded Age was coming to an end, and the 20th century would usher in the Progressive Era. Perhaps the prosperous Hoff, now self-employed and the owner of vast tracts of undeveloped land, was regarded as one of the robber barons of the Gilded Age. It's difficult for me to imagine the life of hardship that these settlers signed up for. They were sustained by a belief that a better life lay ahead. Owning their own farm was a powerful motivator. Sometimes there were unforeseen hardships, though. In 1886, conditions that had led to the Peshtigo Fire of October 8, 1871, returned with an exceptionally dry spring and summer. That led to catastrophic fires in Brown, Shawano, and Oconto counties. Relief committees in Fort Howard and Green Bay sent supplies to the towns of Eaton and Pittsfield in Brown County. Sawmills near Stiles in Oconto County closed, and residents mobilized to fight the fire. In Shawano County, west of Laney, many of Hoff's settlers lost everything as the countryside burned. The underlined portion of this August 16 article in the Green Bay Press Gazette uses J.J. Hoff as a source, stating, "Most of the houses burned were located about 2 miles west and 3 miles northwest of Laney. He thinks all the settlers will stay and rebuild. None of the losers had insurance except John Bonsell, who had his place insured for a small amount." Below is a list of the losers, 28 in number, with a list of property burned. It goes on to name the victims of the fire and list their losses. Relief agencies had yet to arrive in Maple Grove Township. It fell to Hoff to organize relief. He coordinated relief efforts as reported again by the Press Gazette in September of 1886. Hoff arrived in the devastated area with a load of supplies from Milwaukee. This included plows, drags, hoes, and spades, as well as clothing and bedding and cooking utensils, mostly new. Quoting, "We understand that Mr. Hoff sent word at the time of the fire to let no man leave for want of food and clothing, and gave orders to a merchant there to furnish supplies to the amount of $2,000 and to charge his account." The last line of this article searches for the silver lining in the tragedy, quoting, "The fire has burnt up much of the trash and facilitated clearing." Please watch Part 2 to see how Bishop J.J. Fox butted heads with Hoff.